What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Party on Broad. Our NFL draft coverage continues with the man, the myth, the legend. He is Mark Schofield. Go give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Schofield. What's up, Mark?
Crocky, I don't know if the intro reminds me, we're doing this 2 days after 103, 101. And I'm still a little upset over Sixers Celtics the other night. So coming on and seeing all those images right there, like, oh man, that kind of stinks. But no, man, I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Edge rushers, one of the more fascinating position groups, I think, in this entire NFL draft, perhaps next to corner, a position we just did. So I'm excited to dive in. We got some great names to talk about, some great prospects, maybe one at least to the Eagles at some point in this draft. So I'm excited about that as well, maybe at 10. And I got an interesting name there that we're going to talk about. So excited to dive in.
Yeah, man, this is a position with a lot of guys at the top of round one and some really interesting day two guys. And we're also going to break down Mark's most underrated guys on day three. Mark, let's jump right in, man. Quick ranking of your top three edge rushers in the 2023 draft.
Yeah, I mean, number one for me, it's the chalky one, Will Anderson. And I think there's even room to grow there, but he's fascinating to watch. Alabama used him so well. A lot of stunts, twists, so they got to match up one-on-one against interior, guards, centers at times. But he's a fascinating blend of athleticism, explosiveness, and power. And like I said, I even think if he sort of rounds out his pass rushing plan, if he starts adding in some counters and things like that, I think he could be a 10, 15 sack player in the National Football League. So he's one for me. That's a really chalky pick, I know. Two is where I start to go a little bit different than consensus, because consensus is Tyree Wilson, right? He's consensus sort of edge two right now. I go different. Nolan Smith from Georgia.
Wow.
I absolutely loved watching. I absolutely love studying him. And in talking to some other people that, sort of look at the edge position and look at, pass rushers and things like that, they sort of shared that sentiment. Some people that I know and trust really liked him. I loved his athleticism off the edge. He seemed to have a more complete pass rushing toolkit with counters, with hand usage, with long arm techniques that really impressed me studying him. Obviously tested pretty well. I'd say very well. And you start looking at, okay, is he undersized? Yeah. Is he a bit of a tweener? Yeah. What is he sort of compared to? Hassan Reddick. Imagine just for a second having not one but two Hassan Reddicks on your defensive front. And so, I'm getting ready to put out a mock draft next week. Nolan Smith at 10 makes a lot of sense to me. So Nolan Smith is my two. Okay. Tyree Wilson's my three. I really went back and forth, honestly, with Wilson and Myles Murphy from Clemson. Wilson, just in the end, though, the power, the splash plays, the production. I know he's probably a bit bigger, might be sort of a defensive end in a three-man front, three-man surface type of player. But I honestly think that, look, you can find him on the edge in a four-man front as well. You can move him around a little bit. You could use him on the inside of some four-man fronts as well. The power really jumped out to me. So those are my three. I know it's a little bit different than consensus, but that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. The Nolan Smith pick is really interesting because there was some noise between Nolan Smith and the Eagles 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, and it makes a ton of sense. Absolutely makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved studying him. I mean, when you look at some of the plays that he's made off the edge, some of the plays that he's shown you, it's what you want to see from an edge rusher, right? The ability to use your hands effectively, the ability to counter an offensive tackle. The ability, one of the things I really liked about him was how he sometimes set blockers up, stressing leverage, stressing the outside shoulder because he knows he wants to come inside, stressing the inside shoulder because he knows he wants to get to the outside. I think he's got a really good pass rushing plan, which I love to see. And you fold in that athleticism off the edge. Very impressive prospect.
Love it, man. Let's jump into our second question of the day. Who is the edge rusher with the most upside?
I've tended to go like the person at the top says, I've done that at some of the other positions, corner. I did it at QB. I think Wilson, in the sense that if he could consistently live inside and outside, that's fantastic. I mean, Will Anderson's probably more of your like 3-4 outside, your 2-point stance type of player. Nolan Smith's probably the same way. If Wilson can be an impact sub-package rusher on the inside as well as live it on the outside, that's a lot for a defensive coordinator to work with. So he's got a ton of upside. Myles Murphy also, like I said, it was tough for me at the end coming down to that, edge 3 spot between Wilson and Murphy. Murphy just was edged out there by Wilson, pun intended, perhaps. But the athleticism he showed recently at his pro day workout, like that's what you want to see. And edge is one of those position groups where people say, "Oh, the testing doesn't matter." It kind of matters. Like, if you're going to place a bet on an athlete at a position, bet on freak athletes at the edge position. That's why Smith for me is edge 2 in a way, and that's why I think Murphy has a ton of upside.
Yeah, I don't understand why Murphy has fallen or dropped these last 2 months. He was there in the top 5 for a long time, and then it seems like the last 2 months, because he wasn't working out, he
it's so I think he didn't work out. There's this excitement over Lucas Van Ness, which I'm not quite there. I think he's a solid player. I think Van Ness probably comes off the board in the first round. But I just pulled up NFL mock draft database.com, which I absolutely love. It's a great website. But by consensus mocks right now in mock drafts, there are perhaps a flawed data point. He's ahead of Murphy right now. He's ahead of Nolan Smith right now, which I don't quite get. I think I saw a fascinating discussion on social media earlier this week, Crocky, that had, posed the question, who's a prospect that you kind of like, but you'd rather see another team draft just because, it could go either way. And for me, Van Ness is kind of that kind of player where I kind of like him. But if the Patriots draft an edge rusher at 14, I'd rather them go in a different direction, than Lucas Van Ness. And I say that because Nolan Smith is meeting with the Patriots, I think, as we speak. So I was very excited about that. But I think the Murphy slide is in part, like you said, he wasn't working out. This Van Ness climb that we're seeing, in the end, it wouldn't surprise me if Murphy's maybe the third edge off the board.
Yeah, it makes me scratch my head because he has an amazing pro day, the 5th best cone drill. If you included that in the combine among edge rushers, and scouts are like, oh yeah, he can play football. It just doesn't make sense on my end. Anyway, let's roll on to most underrated edge rusher prospect in your opinion.
BJ Ojulari from LSU.
Nice. Okay.
I really like him, and I gotta say, I almost put him at 3. I was watching him again today to get ready for the show, and you see the size, you see the length, and he's got that, I'd say, complete toolkit where it's not just he's got a number of moves that he relies on and he changes things up. He's got the ability to counter. I mean, you saw some spins late in the rep. You saw some counters late in the rep. You saw, okay, you're going to take me to the outside. I'll use that inside spin. Oh, you're going to lock me up on the inside. I'll chop and rip to get away from you. He had a ghost move where he's flashing hands and then dipping him and pulling him away. And he was doing that against Broderick Jones in the conference championship game. Broderick Jones had a tackle that might come off the board inside the top 10. I mean, to be able to do that, again, I say underrated. I'm looking at, consensus mocks right now. He's at 48. I'd take him in the first round. I mean, and if, say, for example, Jalen Carter's there at 10, hypothetically, and the Eagles take Jalen Carter, okay? If Ojulari is on the board at the end of the first, take him and run. Take him and run. So I think he's the most underrated of this group. There's some other names. Will McDonough from Iowa State is getting a lot of attention. Very similar play to Lucas Van Ness and how he was used in their 3-man fronts. But I really like Ojulari.
Love it, man. If the Eagles were to manage somehow to get Jalen Carter at 10, it doesn't matter what they do at 30, in my opinion. Like, you could trade out what we're
getting. And I know we're going to be talking about defensive tackles a little bit later in this series. Yeah, that's an easy one-on-one. And if he's there at 10, it's a run to the podium situation.
100%. Let's roll on to our last question of the evening. Who is a day 3 edge rusher prospect that's not being talked about enough? This is one of my favorites because I love me some day 3 guys.
There are two that I like. There's one that consensus-wise is on the cusps of, round 3, and that's Undercutter from Army. And I know he's had a rough sort of pre-draft process, and the All-Star circuit hasn't been great for him. Some of the testing stuff hasn't been great. But I turn on the film and I see somebody that I would love to draft. I would love to have on my team because you see some examples of him, with some inside moves, some inside swims. He loves coming to the inside. That's, I think, one thing that he'll need to sort of work on is it seems like his go-to plan on every rep is I'm going to come to the inside. I'm going to swim to the inside. I'm going to spin to the inside. I'm just going to try to win with that quick first step to the inside, which is great when you're playing UMass. But you got to have more in the toolkit when you get to the NFL. But I just can't help but being, very intrigued by the potential there. I wrote about him earlier this year. Some of what he did on film a season ago, I thought was very impressive. So he's one for me. And Brenton Cox from Florida is another player that I sort of liked studying. Showed some explosiveness, showed some ability. Needs to have some more consistency. Needs to sort of round things out as well. But those two players, when you get to day 3, are the guys that intrigue me the most.
Oh, man. That is Mark Schofield. Mark, where can we find you, man?
On social media, on the Bird app, at Mark Schofield. There it is. Obviously we're going to have you covered, every single way possible over at SB Nation with the draft. We're going to do mock draft Mondays now until the actual NFL draft. We have you covered on draft night. I'm already working on my round 2 mock. I'm starting to sketch that out, which I'll release first thing Friday morning once the first round gets done. But on social media, at Mark Schofield.